What's up, bangers? Welcome back to the Banger Hangar for the brand new version of your favorite show from BangerTV. This is Horns Redux, not live, but in some comfy chairs, sitting down and discussing, debating, and locking horns around all things metal. You know the usual housekeeping. Subscribe, contribute, comment, help us continue to build this online metal community that goes worldwide. This week, we're digging into a topic, you know, maybe a little on the nerdy side for someone like me who's obsessed with all things visual in the metal realm, but we're here to talk about metal imagery, particularly album art, and metal logos, which we all know this whole aesthetic world of metal is so dear to metal fans because, well, we wear it. So to help me through this crazy visual world, to my left is Nick Sewell.
Hi, Sam.
How are you?
Good to see you.
Good to see you. And to my right is Dan Seagrave.
Hello, Sam.
How are you, sir?
Good.
Thanks for joining me here. Nick, how are you? What have you been up to?
What have I been up to? I've mostly been working in the film titles, music video land.
Yeah.
So a lot of typography, sort of mixed media approach to a bunch of stuff.
Yeah.
A little bit of illustration too.
Yeah.
But sort of running the gamut in that world.
Nick, of course, musician, graphic designer. You've played in a lot of bands here in Toronto.
That's
Short, Illuminati, Biblical,
Yep.
and you know I'm a fan of your latest metal outfit, Mount Cyanide. Some great stuff over the years. And Dan, how are you?
Yeah, I'm all right. I'm ill though today. So
All right.
that's why I coughed in your introduction.
That's okay.
Which,
We keep it loose here.
You do it again later.
No, it's all right. It's better when it's looser. Dan Seagrave, of course, I mean, for I think a lot of metalheads that have been into the underground of the music for a long time know your work going back to, you know, my personal favorites, Morbid Angel, Entombed, Gorguts, and many other bands. So
Indeed.
It's great to have you here.
Thank you.
I've been a big fan of your work for a long time.
Thank
There
you
is
very
a
much.
16-year-old version of myself holding those albums in my
yeah,
room
for sure.
with the headphones on, and kind of losing myself in the swirl of the Altars of Madness cover.
Yeah.
It's a personal favorite.
Thank you.
So good job.
Thank you very much.
So let's just kind of get into this in a general way. Nick, maybe we'll start with you.
Sure.
Like, in your mind, when it comes to metal album imagery and logos, like, why do you think it matters so much? Or maybe a simpler question, like, why does it appeal to you? Just want to get your initial thoughts on this.
I mean, obviously, like, imagery is such a big part of the music. You know, the themes that usually get explored lyrically manifest themselves, you know, in both the record covers and the merch, right?
Yeah.
And so more so, and I guess, you know, there's a very narrative quality to a lot of that stuff. So I think it's just more important than, say, just like regular rock music where you might have, you know, sort of more day-to-day themes,
For sure. Yeah.
you know, in the
Yeah.
songs.
Yeah.
So I think just by virtue of that, you know, there's a narrative tradition that just, like, you know, it lends itself to that. And then if you mix in the sort of the theatrics and of the show,
Yeah.
that, you know, it's a natural fit.
It all works together.
Yeah.
It's an imaginative world. I
Well,
guess,
that's the
in a
thing.
word,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah. So it just seems like, of course, conjure that stuff, like what Dan does, you know,
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
and it speaks to, I'm sure it speaks to the songwriters themselves, but it definitely speaks to the fans.
Yeah. Dan, gotta ask you, I'm sure you've been asked the question a million times, so I'll be the million and first, but since I've never had the chance to interview you and spend much time with you, what got you into doing that, the metal album art in the beginning?
Partially not being able to go to art college,
Right.
or real art college, because I did a pre-diploma, and that didn't go very well. So my friends who also did that pre-diploma went on to real art college, and I stayed home and painted pictures.
Yeah.
That would be from kind of the year '87 onwards. So I had a lot of time on my hands to just focus on my own art.
Yeah.
And then a local band in my village, Lawnmower Death.
Yeah.
Who I don't know if you.
Yeah, of course.
So yeah, we're all in the same village, Ravenshead in Nottinghamshire. Then I heard they got a record deal on RKT Records, which was a minuscule label.
Right.
And I basically told them I was going to, do a cover for them.
Yeah.
They told me they already had a cover. A fan of theirs had sent them a very professional-looking painting. It was like an airbrushed illustration, and it did look really great. But I said, I'm going to do one anyway, and then you've got a choice.
Right.
So it wasn't for any money or anything. I just wanted to do it, and mine was more ramshackle and amateur and whatever. But I think that was in keeping, because they chose it. It was more in keeping with the kind of the music and the low budget aspect of their end product.
Sure.
Which was kind of a joke as well. So it kind of made sense. And then that took about a year to get released, and then. Following that, I ended up working on The Morbid Angel.
Yeah.
Well, that was a painting I was already working on, actually.
So you were working on the Altars of Madness cover before you got the gig, so
it was a piece of art, that I was working on at home.
Right.
So I'd already done, I think I'd already done a couple of more covers for RKT. But yeah, I was interested in that kind of, it was just that I don't even know, I have a sketch somewhere of the actual sketch I did with faces and stuff like that.
Can I buy it?
I can send it. I don't have it here.
Before Nick does?
I don't have it here. It's in England. But
all right, I'll help you track it down.
I have an image file of it. I'm putting a thing together actually for an exhibition, and I have to do a talk about. This is on Friday. Or Saturday actually. This Saturday. They just threw it on me, so I got to pull this stuff together. And I thought it'd be good to have the original sketch, and then the cover, and then talk about the cover. And
I mean, was it in the DNA? You came from a village called Ravenshead.
Ravenshead, yeah.
This is like probably an Amon Amarth song title. I'm not exactly sure that it is, but maybe it was in the DNA. I want to get back to your influences, but Nick, I mean, for you, like, do you have standout favorites in terms of you got the good seat here because we got the giant wall of logos. Like when it either comes to like metal logoing or album art, do you have any favorite artists or do you have any favorite styles? Like, do you have a thing that you're drawn to?
I would say for me, just as a designer, like there's never a favorite because it's always about sort of like the application and how it like captures, what it's trying to represent visually.
Yeah.
Definitely growing up, like all the Derek Riggs Maiden covers are just like, as a kid, you come to it, you're just like, I don't even know. I'm already interested. You know what I mean? Because. So those ones were always just like occupied a lot of mind share with me. Because they again really captured the imagination, that narrative quality of like. Seeing this recurring character and all these different, it's like, now he's in Egypt, now he's flying a plane, now he's like, bounty hunter in a futuristic situation, so.
Amazing, yeah. For you, Dan, I mean, I've mentioned before, Altars of Madness and Left Hand Path were, for me, the two records that you designed that, like, I loved, and they no exaggeration, they remain two of my favorite metal album covers. You were young at the time. Where were you what were your inspirations at that time?
I was 18 when I did the Altars of Madness. 19 when I did the Entomb thing. I think I did an interview last year, and I had to think about how, back in time, how some certain things embedded themselves, and I realized that for certainly an influence for the Altars painting was the film The Thing.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah.
Which I've seen many times, but I only watch it, it's a great film, I only watch it once every 7 years or something.
Yeah.
Because you want to preserve, the goodness of it.
It's got to have the magic each time you come back to it. Yeah.
But I realized that there's that scene where the faces are frozen, melted, and I saw it way back.
Yeah.
And I think that definitely kind of sat with me.
Yeah.
And for the Entombed one, the Left-Hand Path, we used to go when I was a kid to this place up in Yorkshire. My dad was a policeman, and we went to this police training center, and it was in this strange landscape where there's kind of standing stones and things like that.
The moors.
And there's weird rock formations near there called Brimmen Rocks, and there's these 4 stones in particular called the Devil's Arrows, and one of them is offset from the road in these woods, and it's about as high as this ceiling, maybe higher, 14, 15 feet or something. And if you didn't know about it, you would just drive past it, but my dad would know about all these things. So I realized that was, and I actually found a photo of it, and it looks, somebody took a photo, and it actually looks like the Left-Hand Path setting in reality, almost.
Yeah.
And we went there, and that left an impression on me, and so I was recalling that could have been a reason.
Were you a fan of any metal or other album artists at that time?
I would say, like you were saying,
Riggs,
Iron Maiden, particularly in '86, Somewhere in Time album. That was a big.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
That one kind of hooked me in because it had a sci-fi element.
Yeah.
It was a bit like Blade Runner.
Yeah.
And it was a bit of a bit of a Where's Waldo? Like you could spend hours looking at it and find something different each time.
I had a 6-foot. Used to be at the head shops downtown. You could get all the posters, like all the posters for the singles. But I had a 6-foot life-size Eddie as the cyborg, like walking, like towards you, and it was like it was like this awesome poster.
Right.
And I don't know why I never kept it. It was like, but same thing. It was like that one really captured me.
Yeah.
Too. That like.
Yeah. So much detail.
It's like the bar in the background and the neon and like.
Well, and Riggs was great because there was always he always planted little references to Maiden in the background, right? Like
they're
street names
or
like so it was like and you'd hear it in there's references to the songs like 22 Acacia Avenue, and there'd be all these like different references to the song titles or some of the lyrics, right? So
those Easter eggs.
Yeah. So you could sit there and listen to the music and look at the record, and you kind of you felt like it was almost like.
That must have been hard doing those tiny little portraits, though.
Yeah.
Because I'm imagining the painting is not much bigger than that, right?
Yeah. Is that how big you like?
I paint anything from there, but usually 15-inch square, 17.
That was always a moment when I realized that it's like. I was like, how do the people get so much detail there? And I realized it's like, oh, it's not actually just this big. It's like can be, and then they take a photo.
It's like a eureka moment as a young artist. Yeah. Anyway, I don't know if this is in the script, but I feel like we do need to get to the point where I at least ask you guys what your favorite metal album cover is of all time, and maybe you have favorite logos, maybe not. But we'll get to that. All right. Well, clearly we've got a lot to say in the room about. Metal visuals, but we want to get to the viewers. Jessica Hills has sent us a note. Jessica says, album artwork is important for metal because we're a special bunch. I think more than fans of other genres, we care about the producer, the mixer, the studio, the album artist. It's everything. We're also willing to take risks on a band because of the artwork. It's a good point. Often you go into a record store, you wouldn't even know what it sounds like. It's going back to the old days of not knowing what something will sound like, but this album cover looks pretty awesome. With the digital age, it's sometimes hard to decide, do I buy digital or physical, but I will say if the artwork really speaks to me, I'm damn sure willing to pay for a physical copy. Nathan Gifford says, I think more so than any other genre, album art is crucial to metal. It grabs attention, it sets a mood, maybe a horrifying spectacle, a somber, thoughtful atmosphere, or something dark and foreboding. If I see a record with a deep, ancient forest, in Yorkshire, maybe, or something to that effect, there's a good chance I'm getting some black metal. I always found it interesting that one of the subgenres most closely affiliated with darkness and evil, black metal, has some of the most beautiful images of nature as album art. Did you ever do that? Did you ever go into a record store and buy a metal album without even knowing what it sounded like?
Of course.
Yeah.
Power Slave.
Really?
Yep.
Yeah. I guess that happened all the time. Because how would you have heard it? No one was playing on the radio.
And it's like right on the heels of like Raiders of the Lost Ark, so it's kind of like, you know, it's like, whoa, Indiana Jones kind of.
That was well timed.
Yeah, it was like all at the same time, and I was like, that's what I bought. Yeah.
That 84 was it?
84. Yeah. Power Slave was 84. Did you ever do that? Did you spend a lot of time digging and buying metal albums? No.
No, I never bought anything. I didn't have a lot of money growing up. So,
Sure. Yeah.
I didn't buy a lot of stuff.
I'm sure I did. I don't remember any specific. I certainly remember spending a lot of time at my local independent record store in Victoria where I grew up, Lyle's Place. And it was like the only place you could really get all the imports. There was a guy, Jamie Fulton, he was a metal fan, he got all this stuff in, and I remember I spent a lot of time, I didn't have a lot of money either, so I spent a lot of time looking at the records, you know, proportionally to the amount of time I actually like bought stuff, I think, was like this, but I probably bought Venom black metal solely on the basis of the Goat of Mendez head, but hey, it was evocative, right?
Downtown Toronto in the 80s, there was like a whole bunch of like really seedy arcades and head shops, but they all sold posters like of all the record covers that were $2, and t-shirts were like $4, like just like the cheapest, shittiest shirts that would like tear on the way home, you know what I mean? And like not even necessarily like licensed merch.
Yeah.
But like it was all there. So like even as a kid, you'd go downtown to like play video games, and like the head shops are right there, and you like kind of poke around the corner, like there's just like music blasting, and like so all that stuff was there. Yeah. Like not even the records, like just the merch. Yeah.
It's an interesting point that one of the viewers made. I mean, because like in the pre-internet era, like you weren't able to access a lot of this music through radio, or it was all word of mouth, right? So probably a lot of people bought records solely on the basis of what the art was, right?
Or like or hanging out at a record store, right? Where, you know, you're at the mercy of whatever's there,
right?
And or you get introduced by, like you said, by somebody else.
Yeah,
and,
it's kind of a social scene as well, right? So you go to go to a friend's house, they're playing the record, and if you're lucky, they'll make a mixtape or something like that.
Yeah.
That's how you get to see the artwork, and then it's kind of a social group. Right?
Well, that's true. I think
a big social side to metal.
Yeah, I probably stood there just waiting for someone to come by and go, "Oh, you should buy that one," because there was like a bin of like underground metal, and I'm like, I don't know any of these bands yet.
But it makes you wonder if today it's like because there is obviously still like the social aspect to like online, but is it also just like there's just so much more to comb through, you know, that like there's just so much more,
and
you know, like you can't listen to it all.
Now there's all these words to accompany everything, right? So you're never going to be in that process of like discovery quite in the same way.
Or you might be, but it's like it's a smaller window before the next, you know, moment of discovery comes along. It's like that's pretty cool, but then, you know, there's a hyperlink that blasts you off somewhere else, and you're like on, you know, down the rabbit hole.
Yeah. Did so was it
just splinter genres now as well?
Yeah,
like,
well, there is that.
Yeah. I don't know how many, you know, times 1,000. Right?
There's a few, teen of them. Did you? So, was it just a happy marriage in the sense of like aesthetically, like you providing the art for those early earache records, because that was the aesthetic you were into? It fit the music. Is that how it went? How did it go?
Well, it's kind of, that's the kind of thing I was doing anyway.
Yeah,
I was drawing pictures of like people tied to rocks under oceans, like, you know, and strange trees with orbs growing out of them and stuff like, you know, when I was 15 and 16.
Yeah.
Whatever that means, you know. So I was doing kind of fantasy type art that had a little bit of a dark-ish edge to it, or science fictional kind of edge to it.
Yeah.
And a lot of those early covers nobody was really telling me what I should be painting. Yeah. Which is usually, you know, a commission can be somebody giving you a description.
Yeah.
But it doesn't always work out that way.
Yeah.
Sometimes they give you just a theme or a title, but back then it was just a title.
Okay.
So that's all I had. So I just did my own thing with the title of the record plus the title of the name of the band as guidance.
Yeah.
And the knowledge of what the music sounded like.
Yeah.
And yeah, it seemed like I wasn't having to worry about whether I was doing the right thing.
Yeah.
I wasn't competing with anybody. I just thought, okay, I kind of know.
Yeah.
I'll just put what I think works for this.
Yeah. Well, certainly the Left Hand Path cover makes sense.
Makes sense.
Now, the way you're talking, that they're,
it's
it's clearly the visual is linked
the name
to the concept
of the band.
Yeah.
And I mean, it's so absolutely.
That's all you had.
It's on the nose completely. It's a path on the left, which then veers to the right, but
And there's a tomb.
There's a tomb.
Hey.
And
keep it simple.
Limited color palette.
Right.
Add a yellow in there for a bit of visual effect.
Can I ask a question?
Get in there.
Are all your album covers like straight commissions, or do people ever just come to you and like want to use an existing thing that you've done?
I never do that. I don't think I've ever done that.
No.
People do ask, they'll say, do you have a pre-existing piece of art?
Yeah.
And I do, but I don't.
Right.
I don't like to use anything I've made that's not a record cover because I want it to be aligned with the project.
Yeah.
Right? So I want to feel like the theme of the record or some component of the record is being processed through my brain, and so it's got a kind of an added value to it.
Sure.
Here's a question. Don't know if it's a good one. I'll ask it anyway. If album art creation and logoing is just kind of what you were referencing, Nick, like it just speaks to whatever the sound of the music is, and is there bad art? Is there bad album art? Are there bad metal logos?
Yeah.
Or is it just all strictly in the eye of the interpretation?
Well, I think both those things are true. I think there's some stuff that's objectively bad, but then but I also know that there's probably people who love it too.
Maybe.
It's like, I'm not going on record saying any of that, but I'm like,
you don't want
to
say
like,
who.
I will.
The bad.
Okay, it's your
Quiet
show.
Riot. I mean, okay, come on, like that. Great out. Whatever. What are you gonna say about Quiet Riot? Like, I listened to them obsessively in the mid '80s. The logo. I guess it fits.
Yeah.
I mean, whatever. Doesn't do much.
Well, this was like an interesting thing that we were talking about before we started taping, and that's that. So the evolution from bands who had logos that was basically just a font, just like a typeface.
Yeah, right.
And then moving to like more like an actually illustrated logo.
Yeah.
And we were talking about like Rush, like you think of that iconic Rush font.
Right.
That's the same typeface as the Shangri-Las who sang Leader of the Pack.
Is that right?
Yeah.
That's amazing. I mean, it's interesting. I mean, even, you think of Black Sabbath, like, you're right, like the logoing got more and more sort of pronounced, more and more complex as time passes. I mean, Led Zeppelin, Deep Purple, Black Sabbath, like your reference points for those what are generally considered to be the founding fathers of the music, you don't really think of their logos. But by the time you get to say Iron Maiden, or like Motorhead, it's like, or Judas Priest, it's like, oh.
But even like Motorhead is pretty much just like a straight typeface on Mark. You know?
Right.
But obviously it gets more elaborate and embellished with like how it integrates like into a layout and stuff like that. But
right.
Versus like like some of the logos that are actually obviously drawn, like the Death logo or something.
Sure.
Well, it's the one thing that carries through as well, like the logo on a record cover, and then it's still the same logo on the next record cover, and it can be a completely different theme or artist for the next cover, but the logo remains. So the logo, I think, is the most important thing for a band visually, because it's the word. Yeah. It's what kind of sticks in your mind the most, I think.
Yeah, I mean, you can go
it's the iconic thing. Right?
For sure.
Or you can go both ways. Like, you see some bands that just like, they move on to their next record and there's just like a new visual everything,
Sure.
you know, including the word mark and everything. And so it's just goes back to what we're saying. Like there's no one way to do it.
No,
you
but
know?
it's interesting. Like Sabbath, to take one example, there's actually several Sabbath logos, right?
Sure. Yeah.
There's only ever going to be one Iron Maiden logo.
Yeah.
By contrast, right?
Absolutely.
So you get, I guess you do get both of those worlds.
And I wonder if that's, you know, sort of Sabbath's like rock pedigree, you know,
Yeah,
beginnings versus like Maiden, you know, it sort of came later, and it was like just a different tradition.
Well, I'm wondering, and we're really getting into the weeds now, but I wonder if it's got something to do with when merchandising really started to become a huge thing. You know, the Kiss logo was enormously important.
Right.
Kiss was all about merchandising, right?
Yeah.
And by the time you get to a Maiden or a Judas Priest, like the shirts are a major part of the culture,
Huge,
right?
Huge, yeah.
It's interesting though. We don't know who designs the logos. Like all of these names, I'm reading through the names. Like people know who designed the art.
Yeah. Well, because they're usually credited, right? You wouldn't necessarily
I guess
be
so.
credited on the logo.
But it's all. But given what we just said about how important the logos are, it's interesting. Like, who came up with the Iron Maiden logo? I don't know.
I don't know.
And you know, I mean, no discredit to Derek Ray. I mean, those albums. But who came up with the logo? Like,
I don't know.
That's it's a thing, but we don't know who it is.
It's usually a family friend or something, or one of the band. Bruce Dickinson might have done it. He's a clever chap.
He is, yeah.
Well, there's no question that Gene
can do
Simmons came up with the Kiss logo. I mean,
and he'll sue you if you say
that's
otherwise.
Right. There's no, let there be no doubt. Let's dive into some favorite metal album covers. We've got some comments from folks here, some strong opinions. Surprise, surprise. Dale Rose says, Christian Wallen, aka Necrolord, the greatest metal album cover ever is that of Dissection's Storm of the Lightsbane, and I mean the original, not the cropped and color-adjusted art the album is currently stuck with. Only a metal fan would know that detail, by the way. This is a perfect example of a cover that looks the way the record sounds. Impossibly cold, forbidding, unapproachable, but with an undeniable regal beauty. He's also responsible for At the Gate, Slaughter of the Soul, and many other classic covers. Mark Price. Some love definitely needs to be given to two Polish surrealist painters. Pardon my Polish, everybody. Zdzisław Beksinski, rest in peace, and Mariusz Lewandowski. Especially in recent years, many metal bands from various subgenres have been using their work both as inspiration and to visually convey the mood of their music. Currently, the most recognizable is probably Bell Witch's Mirror Reaper. A lot of modern releases. That's cool. We've been talking about a lot of old shit, mostly.
So we're old.
Yeah, because we're old. Matthew Alexander says, Ed Repka. The man absolutely personifies the classic death metal artwork. Everything he touches is gold. If I think of the art associated with some of my favorite records of all time, I'm always drawn to pieces by Ed, like the absolute classic artwork for Death's Leprosy on vinyl back there. There is nothing better than dropping the needle on that record and sitting and admiring the artwork that adorns the record, especially when it fits the album. Ed Repka nails it every time. Christopher Moore says, the first artist I became aware of by name was Brian Schroeder, aka Pusshead, who did a lot of the single covers for Metallica. I never bought an album because of this, as I was already a Metallica fan, but I certainly spent a lot on the t-shirts with his designs. Daniel DK. Is he allowed to comment? Do we need to get security? John Baisley. Love that you instantly recognize his work. There's never a doubt. Same goes for Riddick. Ken Kelly is an absolute legend as well. I can't leave the classic era Repka out either. I also think non-drawn or painted covers can have the same impact. Take Heartwork, for example. It's a cool cover for sure. I've bought countless records based exclusively on the logo or artwork. It's all part of the total package and experience for me. A couple more here. Damien Rakar says, album art is crucial. I really enjoy the artwork of Ray Pettibon. He did all the Black Flag album art, as well as a ton of the flyers, which later became a staple on the entire aesthetic of the band. The most metal album art to me would have to be Cannibal Corpse. This is the literal personification of death metal in every sense of the word. I've bought tons of albums based off art alone, and for the most part, I've never been terribly disappointed. Last, but certainly not least, Maxime Roland says, Dan Seagrave is the definition of metal artwork in my opinion. Every piece he makes is magic. So many details in his art that you have to stare to see everything going on. I also really love the art of Ed Repka. Eliran Kantor, Lewandowski, who was mentioned earlier, Riddick as well. So many great talented artists on the scene. Okay, we got to get to some punchlines here. Favorites. Do you have?
I don't do favorites.
You don't do favorites? Do you do groups of favorites? Do you do some lists? No.
I'm too much of a tourist, really.
Yeah.
Yeah, things just kind of drift in.
Okay. Any, have you mentioned rigs? I mean, maybe it doesn't even need to be within metal.
We're talking about artists here?
Yeah, like, or album artists. Is it, are there others?
Okay.
Yeah.
So I'm actually doing an art show on Friday.
Yeah.
With Cantor.
Okay.
And I should know their names. Riddick is in there.
Yeah.
Arik Roper is in the show.
Okay.
But I'm thinking of like who did Dan McFarlane, who did the artwork for a couple of the Sword records. He's got kind of a sort of like retro futurism style.
Yeah.
It's very clean and kind of.
Yeah, those are cool for sure. You like the sci-fi thing? You've got a bit of the
not exclusively,
okay.
but I think he does it very well, and
it's
reminiscent of that other famous artist whose name escapes me right now. But the guy who did the landscapes for the Yes albums.
Okay, yeah. Well, here's the thing. It's kind of been in here. We kind of touched on it, but does album art matter as much anymore, given that we live in the thumbnail world of staring at our phones?
I think it's made it more in terms of record labels wanting to sell vinyl and packages.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
It's more important now than ever for that kind of approach, I think.
Yeah.
It makes it more for the specialist collector kind of thing. But you still need to have a kind of an identifying thing that pulls it all together.
Sure.
Right. So a kind of it's like building a movie set or something.
Yeah.
In for music.
Sure.
But, so I think people are still interested in that.
Well, maybe earlier point we talked a bit about merchandise, like shirts matter in metal just as much as they used to, if not more, right? And I guess whether or not you can instantly recall, because it's interesting. Love the Rivers of Nile record that we were talking about before we went to camera, but it took me a minute to remember the art where the owls have no name, and now I remember the image of that face. Right. But it's like, if I bought the T-shirt, it would be like, instant recall.
Yeah.
So the shirts matter, and I guess it becomes the world, whatever your latest record is or your tour is, it gets transplanted onto that, right?
It's the backdrop on stage.
The backdrop on the stage, all that good stuff.
But I know what you mean. It's like, if it's in, you're listening, it's on your phone, it's in your pocket. You don't even pull out your phone. You just go about your day and you're listening. You wouldn't be the same way of like sitting in a chair and like taking it all in at once. So
maybe it doesn't weigh into the decision in the same way as it did when we were teenagers and you're standing in the record store. We need to you've only got $10 and you've got to buy one of the 3 records in your hand. It's a bit of an eeny meeny. But I don't know.
Now we're old guys again.
But then again, I mean, there's lots of metal bands that have risen to the top of the heap during the internet era with very strong visual presentation. Mastodon, I think, is a really good example of that. They take that very seriously in terms of how they design their stuff. Let's get into some favorites, Nick Sewell. Do you have any favorites in the metal world? Either logos or album? I guess Somewhere in Time we've talked about.
Yeah, Somewhere in Time, Power Slave.
Yeah.
Not to be a fanboy, but Entombed, Clandestine, I love. Personal
I'm glad you
favorite.
said that and not Left Hand Path. Actually.
Yeah,
Which I consider to be an amateur piece.
I came to
coming from an amateur.
I
was
came to
ashamed of
Clandestine
it, yes.
first, and
Oh.
then
Is that-
went back.
Whoa.
So
I'm
let's
surprised
just
we
flip
can
the
get
script.
along.
Let's flip the script. Of course, you put me on the spot.
That's all right. I mean, there's so much, right?
There's too much. You know, it's like what's your favorite record? Like,
Yeah,
like
yeah.
I don't know.
You think of the bomber imagery of Motorhead. I mean, there's so many, right?
Even like, I mean, the Ace of Spades. It's just a photo, but
Sure.
it's like got that
Sure.
like El Topo.
Yeah,
you know, like
the vibe.
Yeah.
Which apparently
know.
I read is like it's like a slag heap in Stoke-on-Trent.
Oh, really?
Or something like that. Like
Delightful.
Well, it's like they're going for that like.
something like that. Like it's not.
There's other slag heaps available in England. They didn't have to go all the way up there.
But I mean, even there, it's like it's almost like a classic setup, like a classic like music industry setup of like, okay, we're gonna put a photo of the band on the cover.
Yeah.
But you think of how much that photo says about that record.
Right.
You know,
Right.
of like three guys dressed like banditos. You
Yeah,
know, and you're
yeah.
like, yeah, that captures it perfectly, right?
Yeah.
So,
I mean, if I had to choose, it would be extremely difficult. I think.
I couldn't.
Somehow easier to choose your favorite album by a band than it is your favorite cover for some reason. I don't know. It's a weird one.
Speaking of Morbid Angel, I've got a soft spot for Covenant.
Yes.
Like the cover, like.
Yeah.
Just the thought of them laying out like the book
Yeah.
and the knife and like it's all almost like a food photo shoot for a magazine, just like lighting it all. I
Right.
don't know why it's just like
Right. Yeah. I mean, I could ramble off a bunch of favorites. Give me a minute. But Screaming for Vengeance, Judas Priest.
yeah.
The audacity to create a metal album that's primarily yellow
Yeah.
is like the fucking ballsiest thing that's
Yeah.
ever happened for me. What a great image that I feel like Mastodon kind of brought that aesthetic back in. Larry Carroll, rest in peace. The Rain and Blood cover, Slayer
Yeah.
Rain and Blood cover for
Yeah,
me
yeah.
was like super. It was like in the Dan Seagrave world of like sitting there and go. It was so like
Abstract.
creepy. It was like scary because
Yeah.
it was so weird and just the bodies are all disproportionate.
Yeah.
And there's like giant penises and like it's like what the fuck and like loud like hellfire. It was crazy stuff. And of course Derek Riggs. I mean we've talked about him. Impossible to pick a favorite for me. Maybe Killers.
Really? Wow. Killer.
Yeah. And apparently the first one was supposed to have, I think Eddie was supposed to be like hatcheting Margaret Thatcher.
Yeah.
Was like the original debut album cover, but maybe he thought better of it. I don't know if they were Thatcher
that's
Maiden fans. They thought they were going to like alienate, probably
Margaret
not.
Thatcher?
Yeah, that Thatcher. Yeah, that one. Yeah, Dan, before we wrap up, I just wanted to ask you one last question. Have you ever been approached by more mainstream artists?
When you say mainstream, what are you?
I don't know. It's a tough one to answer, but like
Because there's a lot of
outside
metal mainstream.
Sure,
you know.
sure. Outside of metal,
Yeah, somebody was talking about some other artists who've been doing those things, which
Yeah.
is, I think is fine. You know,
Yeah,
I don't, You know, that's their business, right? I mean,
right.
I have been approached. I mean, I did a thing for Dresden Dolls
Okay.
a year or a year and a half ago or something.
Okay. Yeah.
They're not metal, but
Yeah.
they're kind of interesting.
Yeah.
And as artists, I thought, you know, and Amanda, who's the singer, contacted me directly, and I thought
She
yeah.
was a fan of your work, presumably.
I don't know if she was a fan or
Okay.
anything, but she contacted me, and I thought that was nice. It was just for a T-shirt design, and that's you know, I would say they're more. I don't know if you would even say that they're that mainstream actually, but they're certainly they've got, you know, they're very popular.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm doing a thing for a musician who's an electronic musician.
Yeah.
Is an upcoming project. I wouldn't say that they're mainstream either.
Mm-hmm.
They're not actually. It's more of an experimental electronic
Okay.
thing.
Yeah.
But it's it's outside of the metal
Yep.
thing, and it seems like an interesting project. So
Sure.
I'm doing that, and I was approached by 3 years ago by, I guess I can say who, I've never mentioned it, but Post Malone, who's a pop artist, very famous now. 3 years ago, it was the debut record, was in progress, but it was the art department who contacted me, because apparently he's a big metal fan, and likes my artwork, I guess. But, yeah.
If you want to come on the show, Post Malone, we're here for you, buddy.
Yeah, he apparently is a big metal fan. So.
There you go. Last question, I promise. Is metal, like the aesthetic of metal, like at the end of the day, is that kind of where your heart is? Do you think that that's where your artistic sensibilities are best focused, or are you kind of much more liberal and broad than
Yeah, I think, first of all, you have to be an artist, and that's what, I'm always bringing, that's what I am.
Yeah, yeah.
And then you're bringing whatever your particular thing is, the way you view the world and everything, how it all kind of drills down into your artistic practice to something else, which is, I've been lucky to be on the coattails of the, something to do with the heavy metal scene.
Yeah.
Had I not done that, I suppose I would be still doing strange, imaginative artwork, as I do anyway when I'm not doing record covers.
Sure.
So, yeah. So I don't think it has to be exclusive, but it's good. It's good. I'm not complaining. So.
Well, thank you for doing it. I'm glad you're still here doing it.
I was supposed to be sat there keeping an eye on the door.
Oh, yeah.
You haven't missed anything.
In case it all went wrong. And I could just
well, I want to wrap it up. Nick Sewell, thanks for joining us on Lock Horns. Check out Mount Cyanide, fucking killer band. Great to hang with you, Dan Seagrave. Thanks for all the great work. Thanks for joining us on the show. Thanks to the people who sent in their comments. We didn't arrive on the best metal cover of all time, but hey, maybe that gives us an excuse for
Black Sabbath. Black
Sabbath. Oh, a late entry.
Yeah.
It's actually Slayer of Rain and Blood. I get the last word. No. We'll be back. That's for sure. See you next time on Horns Redux.